Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She's a motivational speaker on financial empowerment and personal growth, as well as an author too. No other than Miss Linda Grizely.
Thanks, Daniel. That's a great introduction.
Welcome to Book 101, Miss Linda. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. So, I was a financial planner in the financial service industry for about 6 years. And I recently left that to become a uh, financial educator instead of planner. So, hoping to have a bigger reach, impact more people, reaching out to mainly women, but not just women who feel like they have been behind or are ashamed of where they are and maybe need a little bit extra help in getting their finances organized. So I'm teaching people how to do it themselves.
Miss Linda, congratulations and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today let's talk about your one of your book lessons from thought leaders. Can you tell us about this?
Sure. So, Lessons from Thought Leaders is a collaborative book. As you can see, there are several authors in there. I don't even know the total number. I should probably know that. But there are some better known names as well as some lesser known names like myself. And it's really just little chapters of people's individual life stories. And they're all about up leveling and personal growth and really just things that happened in our lives that brought us to where we are today. So my chapter is a little bit about, how I grew up and the things that led me to the path that I'm on now. And it's really a nice book because it is these smaller chapters from people that you can pick up and read one when you have a chance and you don't have to feel like you're fully committed to a book. And it's kind of uplifting because you hear all these different stories from people that you realize have overcome obstacles and challenges and are really just, still pushing through and leveling up their lives.
Miss Linda, what gap in the market does this book feel that other leadership books don't address?
So it's mainly because it's real people and real stories, and there's like a conglomerate of them. So it's all types of different people, all types of different stories. It fills the idea that the reader is going to connect in some way with someone in this book, right? They're going to hear things and maybe get different pieces of things from different people because there's so many different people in the book. So they're going to get little snippets of things that they can use for their own life or things that they relate to and can understand from the different stories in the book.
What was the most lesson you learned from these conversations from the book itself?
Gosh, everybody just has such a unique story, and it's so nice being able to get a dive inside of some people's heads, right? To see what they're really thinking about their life story. It's different when they're really putting it on paper and they're digging down deep into the things that happened to them or the obstacles that they overcame and how it changed their life, like their life trajectory changed through personal growth and working through those.
Interesting indeed, Miss Linda. Did any leader challenge your assumption about success in their field?
Any leader ever or every
Yes.
leader in the book?
In the book or in your own way?
So I think because the book is really individual stories, I don't feel like there's anything challenging in it, because it's just people telling their story. But there's a lot of great lessons in there. It's called Lessons from Thought Leaders. So there's lessons that each person gives you at the end of their chapter. And so that kind of sums up like the things that they learned through the story that they're telling through that piece of their journey. And I think one of the pieces of my journey is actually another book. So if you don't mind, can I talk about that book too?
Yes, go ahead.
So that book, there was a specific book that shaped my journey, and I mention it in my story in that book. And it's John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And so what happened was, is part of my story is that I was going back to school midlife, and I was getting all these different accolades and like getting a degree and a certification. And a friend of mine invited me to a mastermind of this book. And it was so eye-opening because I realized that I've been putting so much focus on all of these external things and not doing the internal growth that I needed to do. And the laws are about leadership, but they can be applied to almost anything as far as like even just leading yourself. And I think that was a big part of my story, was that transitional point where I went to this mastermind and I was like, oh my gosh, I get it now. I need to do the internal work, and I really need to work on my mindset and being a leader of myself.
Definitely. Be the leader of yourself for sure. So, what's the common habits did you notice among high achievers, regardless of their industry?
I think the biggest thing is that their mindset, that they didn't let things get in their way. In other words, once they had an obstacle in their way, they figured it out. They figured out how to overcome it. But instead of feeling like a victim or feeling like they've been, pushed down in some way, they used it as a stepping stone to climb higher. So every failure, every obstacle, everything that got put in someone's way was used as something to lift them rather than to push them down.
Definitely. Lift them up, not putting them down, people. And how do struggles of like leadership differ from other leader that you knew?
How do they differ from,
Other leader from each other.
oh, like leaders from each other? So
Yes.
there's different, thoughts on leadership. Talking about like especially like the different laws. Like for instance, the law of the lid, which is one of John Maxwell's laws, talks about like a person's leadership ability determines their level of effectiveness as a leader, and that you have an ability and your ability might be at a certain level, but you have to work on that ability to get to a higher level. So it's really about how you can continually improve yourself to be a better leader. There it is. There's a workbook that goes with it, the Laws of Leadership workbook, um, that you're finding there. So there's a workbook that you can get that goes with it too, that helps you understand like how you are as a leader and what you can do to improve yourself.
Interesting book. Totally, totally highly recommended for those leaders out there for sure. And Miss Linda, as a motivational speaker on financial empowerment and personal growth, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
So I think that this book is really the idea of being in leadership of yourself. It reframed leadership for me, not just in business, but in my life. And it taught me that if I wanted different outcomes, I had to lead myself differently, to take ownership and develop habits and then also surround myself with the right people, just like a great leader does with a team. And so part of what I'm doing now is talking about building a life that you love, and as far as with numbers. So it's not just a budget with your expenses, but it's putting yourself on the budget, and it's a mindset of putting yourself first. And budgeting becomes easier when you stop treating it like a punishment and start using it as a tool for aligned living. And that's a way to lead yourself.
Definitely. And good luck to your goals, Miss Linda. And what will be your piece of advice for those leaders out there that want to be, well, leaders of our generation?
I would say the number one piece of advice is to become more self aware. Do the internal work and really try to get inside your head and find out what you can do to be better because everyone is always improving.
Definitely. Improving indeed. And aside from the book of Mr. Maxwell, can you recommend the books or book that influence your journey?
Yes, absolutely. I would say that some of the classics, like Think and Grow Rich and The Tipping Point, those are old classic books, and those are great ones too. Still lots of good lessons that are timely and apply, even though they're older. They're both also about just personal growth and improving your way of thinking.
Yes, older but meaningful books. Classic indeed. So, Miss Linda, can you share an example of self evaluation exercise from the workbook that you mentioned of Mr. Maxwell?
So I actually didn't do the workbook, so I don't know for sure. But I read the book, and I feel like because I went through a mastermind of it, I think that the person who did the mastermind of it kind of walked us through that workbook, even though we didn't have the workbook. I can say that I got so much out of that mastermind, though. It was really very eye opening to me. There was I think when we're talking about the law of the lid, which is what I mentioned before about your leadership ability and how you can improve that. The person, it's not in the book, but the person who led the mastermind told a story about how if you have fleas in a jar and you put a lid on the jar, the fleas normally would have the ability to jump out of the jar. But once the lid is put on the jar, they learn that they can only go so high. And so when you take the lid off of the jar, then the fleas don't jump out of the jar. And that is a really a big lesson about mindset. And what it's supposed to teach you is it's supposed to teach you that there might be obstacles that you can't see that you need to figure out that are limiting your belief as to how high you can jump to get out of the jar. But the lesson that I learned was not only that, because I did learn that lesson, but the other lesson that I learned was that sometimes there's people around you who are all in the jar and don't know that they can jump out. And if you're the person who knows you can jump out, but they're all just telling you to get back down in the jar, then you need to get in a different jar.
Indeed. And Miss Linda Maxwell emphasizes that leadership is about influence, not titles. How does the book help readers build influence in their personal professional lives?
Yeah, it's going to help a lot because it talks about a lot of different ways that they can influence people, and a lot of it is about how just how they can reframe things that they're thinking, as far as like, you know, how leaders sometimes um don't give power to others, but that true leaders give power to others and lift them up and aren't afraid of losing their place as a leader. So it's all about giving back and leadership, leading by example. Leaders have to model the behavior they want to see in others, that people buy into the leader first and then the vision. There's all these different things that he talks about, and they're all going to feed into that.
Definitely. And what do you think the flaws of the book?
I
Yes.
think that the book is mainly just about looking internally to yourself and understanding how you can be a better person overall, whether you're leading people, whether you're leading yourself, whether you're leading your family. I mean, all of the topics in here are relatable to anyone, even if they're not in a leadership position in their career.
Definitely. So, can you explain the significance of the book subtitle? The
Follow them and
people.
people will
Yeah.
follow you. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It's
Um,
empowering, right?
yeah, exactly. It goes back to that whole idea that you lead by example and that you lead by giving first and that you lift others up. And it's about how if you lead your people by following them and get their input on things and make them feel important and them have a purpose, then they will follow you because you're fueling them with what they need.
Definitely. Lead by example for sure. Which of the 21 laws do you find most impactful, and why do you think it's resonates with leaders today?
So for me, the most impactful one was that law of the lid, but I don't think that's the most impactful one for everyone. I would say that a good thing to know for everyone is that the law of the big momentum. So momentum is your leader's best friend, and it makes everything easier and multiplies the impact. So once you get the momentum going, it's much easier to move forward. But in order to get the momentum going, you have to do all the other things. So there's the law of sacrifice where a leader must give up to go up. Leadership demands trade-offs. There's understanding the laws of priorities, where activity isn't necessarily accomplishment, but focusing on what matters most is. It's about empowering others. It's about looking at the big picture to see what other people see that you might not be able to see from your point of view. So it's really just that overall thing that plays into the law of the big which is momentum, that keeps you going.
Miss Linda, how does Maxwell's emphasis on influence over title in the law of influence change the way we view leadership in a modern context?
So I would say that it's really the law of influence and leadership being not about titles or positions is exactly what it says. It's about how you influence other people. Because if you can influence people, right? If you have that ability to get them to believe you and to influence you, you're going to lead them. And it's not going to matter if you are the leader by title or the leader by position. If you're the person who has that ability to influence them, then you're the one they're going to lead, whether you have that title or not. And they might not be leading the person, they might not be following the person who is the actual leader, because that actual leader might not have the ability to influence them.
Definitely. And Maxwell uses examples like Harriet Tubman and Steve Jobs. How do these diverse figures demonstrate the timeliness of the 21 laws?
Wow. So there are some really great stories in this book about all of them.
Yes.
I think that there are so many famous people that he refers to in this book. And I can't remember right offhand which person went with which lesson, but they're all really great real world big examples of how these laws take place in the real world.
Hmm, definitely. The law of solid ground emphasizes trust as the foundation of leadership. How does the book guide readers to maintain trust?
So it's going to talk about how to maintain trust throughout, because the idea is that if your followers, if your people don't trust you, then they're not going to follow you, and everything is going to collapse because there's no foundation. So you have to have that solid ground to build upon. So building that trust is super important. And I know he goes into it in here more, but the whole idea is really that all of these laws, while they have separate chapters and he talks about them separately, they all feed into each other, right? So the more you can, respect other people, the more you can influence other people, the more you can get the buy-in of other people, the more you can raise your lid. All of those things fall then into trust. So it's like all of the laws feed into each other.
Interesting indeed, Miss Linda. And how the book address the law of empowerment, and why is empowering others critical for effective leadership?
When you empower others, you lift them up and you teach them to do things and you empower them to do them on their own. As a leader, sometimes people get afraid of that because they're afraid that they're going to lose their place, or that someone's not going to do it the right way, or they're not going to do it the way they want to. But as a leader, it's important because you need to delegate to people and you need to trust them and you need to empower them to do those things so that you can continue to grow yourself. Because if you stay in those places and you don't empower others, then you're going to put a lid on yourself as far as how much you can grow.
Very well said, Miss Linda. Very well said. Can you share an example of a law of buy-in which is ties leadership to credibility, plays out in the real-world leadership scenarios?
Yeah. So the buy in is the idea that if you just tell people what to do, then they're going to resist it. So by getting the law of the buy-in is about getting people to understand the why behind you're doing something, or maybe even to have them feel like it was partially their idea, where they are fully invested in the idea in order to, let's say, make a change. So like change in organizations is a hard thing, and there's people that study change and who you know um, are specifically in roles where they facilitate change in organizations because it is so hard. And a big part of what they do is try to get the buy-in from the other people in the organization. They try to get people to understand why they're doing it. They try to get people to accept that it's happening. And the more that they can do that, the easier a transition or a transformation will go.
Miss Linda, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in first. No, fourth season, and my baby podcast is Law 101 and Mental Health 101, Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in its fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcasts. And Miss Linda, what do you hope readers, whether a new or seasoned leaders, take away from the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership to transform their approach to leading others?
I hope that they decide to take a personal growth journey and look more internally and start thinking about things differently, because it really made a big difference in my life.
Definitely. Miss Linda Grizely, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your projects, your coaching, or any projects that you're doing right now?
Sure. So I'm building some courses on financial planning and also on budgeting and putting yourself in the budget, because you can't live a life you love on a budget you hate. So if they're interested in learning more about that, they can go to lindagriz.com. That's LINDAGRIZ.com/resources to take a free quiz to get their money personality or their money confidence.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Linda Grizely because if you support her, for sure, more and more and more empowering advocacy to come, more and more and more projects to come, and for sure, more and more business to come. So, Miss Linda, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
More to come, people. See you soon.